Imagine a city with no cars, no streets, no intersections, no traffic lights blinking through the night. Imagine a city where you can walk from your apartment to a forest, from a school to a mountain, from a hospital to the sea, all within 5 minutes. Imagine a city that produces no carbon emissions, a city powered entirely by the sun and the wind, a city where artificial intelligence monitors every system, every flow, every breath of energy. Now imagine this city is 170 kilometers long and only 200 meters wide. This is not science fiction. This is not a concept buried in the pages of an architecture journal. This is not a student's thesis project or a philosopher's thought experiment. This is the line, and Saudi Arabia is building it right now. In January 2021, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stood before a screen and introduced the world to what he called the future of urban living. The presentation was slick. The renderings were breathtaking. The promises were extraordinary. No roads, no vehicles, no emissions. 9 million residents living in perfect harmony with nature and technology, a city that would redefine what cities could be. The world watched, some with wonder, some with skepticism, many with disbelief. But in the desert of northwestern Saudi Arabia, in a region called Tabak, machines began to move. Earth began to shift. The largest construction project in human history had begun. The question is not whether the line will be built. The question is what it will cost. And I am not talking about money. To understand the line, you must first understand its shape. From above, it appears as a single stroke drawn across the desert. A surgical incision through rock and sand. A line. Literal, uncompromising, absolute. The structure consists of 2 parallel buildings, each rising approximately 500 meters into the sky. Between them, a gap of perhaps 200 meters. Inside that gap, layered platforms create vertical neighborhoods, stacked gardens, suspended walkways. The exterior walls, a mirrors, reflective glass stretching from the Red Sea coast into the Sarawat Mountains. The desert will see itself. The sky will see itself. The line will be visible and invisible at once. This is the design. This is the vision. But visions are easy. Concrete is hard. The engineering challenges alone defy conventional understanding. How do you climate control a structure that stretches across 3 different climate zones? How do you ensure structural integrity across 170 kilometers of seismic variability? How do you move 9 million people horizontally when your city has no horizontal transportation? The answer, according to NEOM's planners, is speed. Beneath the line, a high-speed rail system will transport residents from one end to the other in 20 minutes. Vertical transportation, elevators, lifts, autonomous pods, will handle movement between levels. Artificial intelligence will optimize every journey, every transition, every moment of friction. The goal is that no resident should ever need more than 5 minutes to reach essential services. 5 minutes to school, 5 minutes to healthcare, 5 minutes to nature. It sounds perfect, but perfection has a price. The desert where the line is being built is not empty. This is a common misconception, perhaps an intentional one. The renderings show pristine sand, untouched mountains, a blank canvas, awaiting the architect's vision. But the Tabak region has been inhabited for thousands of years. The Hawata tribe has called this land home for generations. They have buried their ancestors here. They have built their memories here. They have understood this desert in ways that no algorithm ever will. In 2020, members of the Hawata tribe began receiving notices. The land their families had lived on for centuries was needed. The state was claiming it. Compensation would be provided. Some accepted. Some did not. Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti did not. He was a farmer, a tribal member, a man who had grown old watching the same stars his grandfather had watched. When officials came to his village to discuss relocation, he refused. He posted videos online. He spoke to journalists. He said he would not leave. In April 2020, Saudi security forces arrived at his home. According to official reports, there was an exchange of gunfire. Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti was killed. The government called him a terrorist. His family called him a martyr. International human rights organizations called it an extrajudicial execution. The line's promotional materials do not mention Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti. The mirrors reflect the sky. They do not reflect history. Let us return to the numbers. 170 kilometers. 500 meters tall. 200 meters wide. 9 million residents. These are the figures repeated in every press release, every investor presentation, every glossy brochure. But numbers can deceive. 9 million people in a single linear structure would create the most densely populated corridor on Earth. For comparison, Manhattan, one of the densest urban environments in the Western world, houses approximately 1.6 million people across 59 square kilometers. The line proposes to house nearly 6 times that population in a structure with a footprint of only 34 square kilometers. The density would be unprecedented. The social engineering required would be extraordinary. And here is where the silence begins. NEOM's planners speak extensively about technology, about sustainability, about innovation. But they speak very little about governance, about community, about the invisible threads that hold human societies together. How will 9 million people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different beliefs coexist in a single corridor? Who will make the rules? Who will enforce them? Who will decide what is acceptable behavior in the world's longest building? The promotional video shows smiling families, joggers on suspended pathways, children playing in vertical gardens. They do not show conflict. They do not show disagreement. They do not show the friction that defines every human community ever built. The line promises harmony, but harmony, at this scale, requires control, and control requires watching. NEOMs. Official documents describe the line as the world's first cognitive city. This is a term worth examining. A cognitive city is a city that thinks. A city where sensors monitor air quality, foot traffic, energy consumption, waste production. A city where artificial intelligence analyzes patterns, predicts needs, optimizes systems in real time. The benefits are obvious. Traffic that never congests. Energy that never wastes. Services that arrive before you know you need them. But cognitive cities require data, and data requires collection. Every movement tracked. Every purchase recorded. Every interaction logged. The city that thinks is also the city that watches. NEOM's planners acknowledge this. They describe it as a feature, not a flaw. They promise that data will be used only for optimization, only for improvement, only for the residents' benefit. But Saudi Arabia is not Denmark. It is not a country with robust privacy laws, independent courts, and a free press that can hold power accountable. Saudi Arabia is a country where journalists can disappear, where activists can be imprisoned for tweets, where the definition of terrorism is broad enough to encompass almost any dissent. In this context, what does a cognitive city become? The line's mirrors reflect the desert, but who watches? The mirrors. Let us talk about money. The estimated cost of the line is $500 billion. This figure is almost meaningless in its scale. It is more than the GDP of most countries. It is more than the combined budgets of NASA for the past 50 years. It is a number so large that it ceases to have practical significance. But here's what matters. Saudi Arabia is betting its future on this project. Vision 2030, the kingdom's ambitious reform plan, depends on diversifying the economy away from oil. Tourism, entertainment, technology. These are the sectors meant to replace petroleum revenues as the world transitions to renewable energy. The line is the centerpiece of the strategy. It is meant to attract investment, talent, and attention. It is meant to prove that Saudi Arabia can build the future. But the economics are precarious. Oil prices fluctuate. Global investment is uncertain. The tourism industry is volatile. And the line requires not just construction capital but ongoing operational subsidies that may stretch for decades. If the project succeeds, Saudi Arabia becomes a global hub for innovation and sustainable living. If it fails, the kingdom is left with the world's largest monument to hubris. The stakes could not be higher, and the timeline could not be tighter. The original plan called for the line to be completed by 2030. 9 years to build something that has never been built before. 9 years to solve engineering problems that have never been solved before. 9 years to relocate populations, train workforces, develop technologies that exist only in concept. By 2024, reality had intervened. Reports emerged that the project's scope was being reduced. The initial phase would house only 300,000 residents, not 9 million. The timeline was being extended. The ambitions were being tempered. Saudi officials denied any fundamental change. They described adjustments as normal project evolution. They insisted the vision remained intact. But the construction sites tell a different story. Satellite imagery shows progress. Yes, Earth has been moved. Foundations have been laid. The scale of activity is genuinely impressive, but it is also genuinely behind schedule. And here is the paradox of megaprojects. The longer they take, the more they cost. The more they cost, the harder they are to justify. The harder they are to justify, the greater the pressure to cut corners, reduce scope, compromise vision. The line was announced as a revolution. It may end up as a compromise. Construction of this magnitude requires labor. Hundreds of thousands of workers, perhaps millions over the project's lifetime. Engineers, welders, electricians, carpenters, and beneath them, the vast workforce that does the hardest jobs for the lowest wages. They come from South Asia, from Southeast Asia, from Africa. They come seeking opportunity, seeking wages they cannot earn at home, seeking a better future for families they leave behind. They live in camps. They work in shifts. They endure heat that can reach 50 degrees Celsius in summer. The Gulf's labor system has been documented extensively. The kafala system, which ties workers to specific employers, restricts their movement, limits their rights, has been criticized by human rights organizations for decades. Saudi Arabia has announced reforms, new laws, new protections, new rhetoric about worker welfare. But rhetoric and reality do not always align. The line's promotional materials show gleaming towers, pristine gardens, happy residents. They do not show the camps. They do not show the workers who will spend years building a city they will never be allowed to live in. The mirrors reflect the future. They do not reflect the present. The line is marketed as the world's most sustainable city. 0 carbon emissions. 100% renewable energy. 95% of land preserved for nature. A harmony between human habitation and ecological preservation. These are extraordinary claims. Let us examine them. The construction of the line requires the largest earth-moving operation in history. Mountains are being excavated. Coastlines are being reshaped. Millions of tons of concrete and steel are being transported across the desert. Concrete production alone accounts for approximately 8% of global carbon emissions. Steel production adds more. Transportation, machinery, the energy required to power construction sites in a region with limited infrastructure. All of this has a carbon footprint. NEOM's response is that operational emissions will be 0. The city, once built, will run on clean energy. But this argument contains a logical gap wide enough to drive a convoy through. The carbon emitted during construction does not disappear when construction ends. It remains in the atmosphere for centuries. The line may eventually be carbon neutral in operation, but it will never be carbon neutral in existence. And there are other environmental concerns. The Red Sea coast, where the line begins, is home to coral reefs, marine ecosystems, migratory bird routes. The mountain regions contain endemic species found nowhere else on Earth. How will a 170 structure affect these ecosystems? What happens to migration patterns when a 500-meter wall bisects the desert? What happens to groundwater when you build the largest building in human history on land that receives less than 100 millimeters of rain per year? NEOM's environmental impact assessments are not public. The mirrors reflect what they choose to reflect. Let us imagine, for a moment, that the line is completed. Let us imagine that the engineering challenges are solved, the financing secured, the construction finished. Let us imagine 9 million people moving into this linear city. What would it feel like to live there? This is a question that NEOM's presentations rarely address directly. The line is enclosed, climate-controlled, optimized. Residents will live their entire lives inside a structure. They will never need to go outside. Indeed, the outside barely exists in any meaningful sense. The exterior is mirrors. The interior is everything. Human beings evolved on savannas. We are creatures of open skies, distant horizons, the ability to see threats and opportunities from far away. Our psychology is shaped by millions of years of living under the sun and the stars. What happens when you remove all of that? Studies of enclosed environments, submarines, space stations, Antarctic research bases, consistently document psychological challenges. Cabin fever, depression, interpersonal conflict, a sense of disconnection from reality. The line's designers argue that their structure is different. Vertical gardens, simulated nature, access to daylight through careful architectural planning. But simulation is not reality. A garden suspended 500 meters in the air, surrounded by glass and steel, is not a forest. A view of mountains through a window is not standing on a mountain. The line promises nature. It delivers representation. Here's a question that haunts the line's vision. Who will live there? The promotional materials suggest a cosmopolitan population. Innovators, entrepreneurs, families seeking a better quality of life, people choosing to live in the future. But choice is a complicated concept. In Saudi Arabia, citizens live where the state permits them to live. Residency is controlled. Movement is monitored. The idea of freely choosing to relocate to an experimental city assumes a level of individual autonomy that may not exist. For foreign residents, the engineers, the teachers, the service workers who will make up a significant portion of the line's population, choice is even more constrained. Visas are tied to employment. Employment is tied to residence. Leave your job. Lose your right to remain. And for the Hawaiitat, for the people who lived on this land before the bulldozers arrived, choice was never offered. Their land was taken. Their villages were demolished. Their ancestors' graves are now construction sites. The line speaks the language of freedom. Freedom from cars. Freedom from pollution. Freedom from the inefficiencies of traditional cities. But freedom from is not the same as freedom to. And a city where every movement is optimized is also a city where every movement is controlled. There is a reason the line's exterior is covered in mirrors. The stated reason is aesthetic. The mirrors will reflect the desert landscape, making the structure blend into its environment. The line will be visible and invisible simultaneously. But mirrors have another property. They show you what you want to see. Stand in front of the line, and you will see desert. You will see sky. You will see yourself. You will not see what is behind the glass. You will not see the systems, the sensors, the algorithms, the 9 million people living in optimized enclosure. This is perhaps the most honest thing about the line's design. It is a city that reflects, it does not reveal. And in this, it is a perfect metaphor for the project itself. The line reflects Saudi Arabia's ambitions, its desire to be seen as innovative, progressive, forward-thinking, its determination to build a future that breaks from the past. But what is behind the mirror? The human rights concerns that international organizations continue to document, the labor conditions that remain opaque, the environmental impacts that remain the cultural costs that remain unspoken. The mirror shows the future. It hides the present. The line is not being built only for Saudi Arabia. It is being built for the world. Every press release, every rendering, every carefully produced video is designed for international consumption. The line is a message, broadcast in the language of architectural ambition, saying, "We are not what you think we are." For decades, Saudi Arabia's international image was defined by oil, by religious conservatism, by the restrictions that governed daily life. Women could not drive, cinemas were banned, music concerts were forbidden. Vision 2030 changed this, or rather, it changed the image. Women can now drive, cinemas have opened, concerts feature international stars, tourists can visit. The kingdom is open for business. The line is the architectural embodiment of this transformation. It says, "We are building the most advanced city on earth. We are solving problems that other nations cannot solve. We are the future." But images can be curated. The same kingdom that builds the line also imprisons activists. The same leadership that promises innovation also silences dissent. The same vision that speaks of freedom also maintains one of the most controlled societies on earth. The line is a mirror facing outward. The world sees what Saudi Arabia wants it to see. Saudi Arabia is not alone in building impossible cities. Across the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates has its own mega projects. Abu Dhabi's Masdar City. Dubai's endless expansion. Qatar's developments for the World Cup and beyond. China builds new cities from scratch. India plans smart cities by the dozen. Indonesia is relocating its capital to a purpose-built metropolis in Borneo. The 21st century is the century of urban ambition. Nations compete to build the most impressive, the most innovative, the most futuristic cities. The line is Saudi Arabia's entry in this competition. But competitions have winners and losers. Masdar City, once hailed as the world's first zero-carbon city, is largely empty. Its original ambitions have been scaled back repeatedly. It stands as a cautionary tale of what happens when vision exceeds execution. Other planned cities have similar histories. Ghost towns. In China, abandoned developments in the Gulf. Mega projects that consumed billions before being quietly shelved. The line's proponents argue it is different. The financing is secured. The commitment is real. The leadership is determined. But determination does not guarantee success. And the desert is patient. It has swallowed ambitions before. For all the attention the line receives, there is something missing from the conversation. The voices of ordinary people, not the executives and architects who present at conferences, not the officials who give carefully scripted interviews, not the influencers who are flown in for curated tours, the workers in the camps, the families being relocated, the residents of nearby towns whose lives will be transformed, the young Saudis who are told this is their future. What do they think? What do they hope? What do they fear? These voices are largely absent from the discourse. They exist, certainly. People have opinions. People have concerns. People have dreams that may or may not align with the dreams being built in their name. But in a society where public dissent carries risk, silence becomes the default. And so the line rises in something close to quiet. The construction is loud. The machinery is deafening. But the human conversation, the messy, complicated, democratic conversation that shapes cities in other parts of the world, is muted. The line will be built by decree. Whether it will be lived in by choice remains to be seen. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has staked his legacy on Vision 2030. The line is the most visible manifestation of that vision. If it succeeds, he will be remembered as a leader who transformed Saudi Arabia, who proved that nations can reinvent themselves, who built the impossible. If it fails, the failure will be his as well. This personal investment creates its own dynamics. When a leader's legacy depends on a project's success, criticism becomes difficult. Honest assessment becomes rare. The incentive structure favors optimism over realism. Progress reports over problem reports. Mega projects around the world have suffered from this dynamic, the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to continue investing in failing projects, because so much has already been spent, combines with political pressure to create momentum that is difficult to stop. The line may be too big to fail, but it may also be too big to succeed, and the distance between those two outcomes may be measured in silence. The Arabian desert has seen empires rise and fall. The Nabateans built Hegra, carved cities into rock that still stand today. The trade routes brought wealth and culture across these sands for millennia. Kingdoms emerged, flourished, and faded. The desert remains. This is not mysticism. This is geology, climatology, the patient truth of landscapes that operate on timescales humans struggle to comprehend. The line is being built in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Summer temperatures exceed 50 degrees. Sandstorms can reduce visibility to zero. The ground itself shifts and settles in ways that engineers are still learning to predict. For a structure to survive here for decades, for centuries, it must contend with forces that do not negotiate. The desert does not care about Vision 2030. The desert does not care about architectural ambition or geopolitical positioning or the dreams of princes. The desert simply is, and the line must prove itself against that indifference. Imagine a child born in the line in 2040. This child will grow up in a world unlike any human has experienced before. Their home will be a vertical city. Their school will be suspended in the air. Their playground will be a garden enclosed by glass. They will never know traffic. They will never know pollution. They will never know the inconveniences that defined urban life for their grandparents. But they will also never know certain freedoms. The freedom to wander aimlessly. The freedom to get lost. The freedom to exist in spaces that are not monitored, optimized, or controlled. They will grow up in a cognitive city. A city that knows where they are at every moment. A city that anticipates their needs before they express them. A city that is, in some sense, always watching. What kind of adults will these children become? What will they dream about? What will they rebel against? These questions cannot be answered. The experiment has not yet been run. The children of the line do not yet exist. But if the project succeeds, they will. And they will inherit a world that we who grew up in older, messier, less perfect cities can barely imagine. In 2024, reports began emerging of problems. Delays, cost overruns, technical challenges, worker disputes, the usual difficulties of mega projects, magnified by the line's unprecedented scale. These reports were denied, qualified, explained away. Normal adjustments, expected evolution. The vision remains intact, but cracks had appeared in the mirror. International investors grew cautious. Some foreign partners quietly withdrew. The tourism projections that underpinned the economic case began to seem optimistic. None of this means the line will fail. Mega projects often face difficulties in their early phases. Cost overruns are standard. Delays are expected. What matters is whether the project can adapt, overcome, and ultimately deliver. But the cracks are worth noting. They suggest that the line is not inevitable, that the future it promises is not guaranteed, that the mirror, for all its polish, can still break. And if it breaks, what will be left? Let us step back. Let us look at the line not as a construction project or an investment opportunity or a political statement, but as something more fundamental. The line is a question. It asks, what do we want cities to be? For thousands of years, cities have grown organically. Streets emerged from footpaths. Neighborhoods formed around markets and wells. The shape of a city reflected the accumulated decisions of millions of people over generations. The line rejects this model entirely. It proposes that cities can be designed from first principles, that experts can determine optimal arrangements, that technology can solve problems that organic growth creates. This is not a new idea. Planners have proposed rational cities. Before Brasilia, the socialist housing blocks of Eastern Europe, the results have been mixed. Some planned cities work. Others become monuments to the hubris of their designers. The difference often lies in factors that cannot be designed. The human factors, the social factors, the unpredictable magic that turns a collection of buildings into a community. The line is the largest bet ever placed on the idea that cities can be perfected through design. If it succeeds, it will change how we think about urban life forever. If it fails, it will stand as the ultimate cautionary tale. The desert stretches in every direction. To the west, the Red Sea, ancient and patient. To the east, the mountains, carved by time. And between them, rising from the sand, a line. 170 kilometers of ambition, of contradiction, of questions that have no easy answers. Is the line a vision of the future or a monument to hubris? Is it a solution to urban problems or the creation of new ones? Is it freedom designed in glass and steel or control made invisible by mirrors? The construction continues. The machines move earth. The workers labor under the sun. And the world watches, uncertain whether it is witnessing a revolution or a mirage. Perhaps it is both. Perhaps every great ambition contains within it the seed of its own critique. Perhaps the line between vision and delusion is thinner than we would like to believe. Perhaps the future is always built on foundations we cannot fully see. The line will rise. What it will become, what it will mean, remains unwritten. The desert keeps its secrets. The mirrors reflect only what is placed before them. And somewhere, in the silence between the announcements and the construction noise, a question hangs in the air. A question about cities. A question about control. The question about the price we pay for the futures we are promised. The line does not answer this question. It embodies Italiano.